Tyler, I'm going to start with you on this one. The theme of the show, as I mentioned at the top of the program, is what the is going on in our Western leagues, in the LEC and the LCS. What is going on in the LEC right now? Why are we in this giant bowl of soup situation with all of these teams performing well one week, underperforming another week? We're getting surprise results. Nobody knows what the hell is going on. Tyler, why are we in this predicament?
I mean, I think it would be foolish and kind of silly not to mention that online play, as we will dive into, is a big reason why LEC might not so much be the LCS's main problem, but essentially for specifically the LEC, the game levels have gone down. The level of play, I would say, has dropped quite considerably. And also with G2 and Fnatic, kind of the mom and dad of the LEC, right? When the mom and dad are home, like there's order in the house. You always have those two to look upon and be like, everything else in LEC can go down to a dumpster fire, but you can always look up to mom and dad and be like, we're gonna be okay in the end. Like when it goes to Worlds, we'll always have G2 and Fnatic. This split, mom and dad are gone. They're on a bender somewhere in Las Vegas. Like they're nowhere to be seen, Arda. They are gone, and that means the kids are ruling the roost, which means you have Rogue and Mad Lions, and you look at these teams, and they are not the teams and they play such a sporadic style. And like 1 week Rogue looks great, the next week they look inconsistent and they throw games. Mad Lions, this team that a lot of people are saying, oh, they could be one of the best European teams of all time, are still showing growing pains because they are a young team. They are a very, very young team that's not going to be G2 because they don't have the experience and the necessary, international, reps that they do. They're still so young, except Humanoid, who has had those Worlds reps last year playing on the big stage in Madrid. But the rest of the players are still so young. So right now in the LEC, it's a thing of the two pillars of the league, Fnatic and G2, look mortal. They look out of sorts, which leaves us in this predicament where it's kind of a mess. And I do want to say that online play probably has a lot to do with it. I do think that has, LEC was rolling, and now it kind of feels like they've taken a step back. And I think that's also a big thing, right? Where the LEC was being talked about as the best region in the world. Like LCS has been fourth. It's going to stay fourth. If they get a team to quarterfinals, it'd be very impressive. Where the Europe was like, we can do this. We made 2 World Finals. We won MSI. We are right up there with China. And then this split, it just looks like they're kind of lost. With mom and dad gone, LEC isn't as secure as it once was. So I would say online play is a big thing. And also the falterings of Fnatic and G2 has also made it a much more chaotic split for Europe.
So Emily, specifically as it pertains to online play, that's a very good point. But like, let's dive into that. Let's detail exactly what you have noticed since play went online that concerns you about LEC play. What have you been noticing?
I mean, I think the big thing for me with teams in the LEC, and this isn't like picking on any one team, to be honest, it's like across the board, is that they're making a lot of small mistakes on the map that I didn't see some of these teams, especially the teams towards the top. So Tyler mentioned that, it makes a huge imbalance when G2 and Fnatic aren't doing well, because those are kind of the teams that have represented Europe every year at international events. And they are, in a sense, what's given Europe this kind of perceived strength internationally, right? Like especially G2, but also Fnatic. Fnatic's been around for forever. They've usually performed really well at international events. They made Worlds Finals 2 Worlds ago. And with a lot of these teams towards the top, even like the Mad Lions and Rogue, Rogue, who did a lane swap this week, which I actually didn't hate. I think they made a lot of mistakes in executing it, but I don't necessarily think the lane swap itself was terrible, but I know that's a very controversial opinion. I was happy to see it tested. I don't know why the Scion didn't die. I thought they were going to have it die. And then, anyway, I think like it comes down to a lot of really minor mistakes that I'm not used to seeing LEC teams do, especially around how they play around vision, how they trade for objectives, minion wave management, and matchups are something that, like, especially laning matchups, I always think of, when I think of the LEC, when I think of previously when it was called EU LCS, I always think of these laners who have a really good understanding of laning matchups, right? And so when they go into draft, they'll really focus. Like, I know the Lane Kingdom meme comes from LEC, but like I've always really appreciated that about LEC, whether it's a bot laner or solo laners. I feel like they have a really strong understanding of how to play specific laning matchups. And I've seen less of that this year. I've seen a lot more like mistakes when it comes to those minutia that, like, no offense, like I don't expect most North American teams to necessarily be able to do, but like I do expect it from especially like the top half of the LEC. And I see them making a lot of those minor mistakes with things that they had done in the past. And I don't know if it's an online thing, but I do think playing online really makes a huge difference because of a lot of reasons. And to be clear, a lot of this is presumption because I haven't talked to the LEC teams about this specifically, but talking to other players who are have spoken to me about playing online, like the challenges to it, a lot of it is like, even though they're together, right, in Berlin, in team houses, they like it's difficult to get in that mindset sometimes if you're not like getting up and going to the studio and it's game day and there's like a different atmosphere and attitude about being on stage as opposed to being online, where like you might just be heading in your gaming house to another room in the house, or you might still be traveling to the gaming house but still not like on a stage, right? So there's not that same kind of sense of urgency, I guess. I haven't seen anything like the ping issue like at MSC where we saw Tian like fudging his Kindred ults and they were really bad because the timing was off because of ping. Like, I haven't seen anything like that, but I do think it is a lot more difficult to get in that mindset, and some teams are a lot more successful at it than others. And when we look at G2 and when we look at Fnatic, even before we expected them to do super well at like 2018 Worlds, for example, right? You saw these teams really flourish and come into their own on a stage. And I do think that's something that's missing. And I do think it's affected the LEC adversely.
Yeah, I think it's telling that the top two teams in the LEC are two of the youngest teams in the LEC in terms of age. I did something a while ago. Arda actually reached out to me about it a few weeks ago, or last week, I think. I did a piece in the off season about ages in the LCS and the LEC, how long certain players have played, which legacy players have been there since the very beginning of the riotified Western League of Legends scene when they first started the LCS in 2013. And the LEC is incredibly young, and it only got younger after that piece was written because teams like Mad Lions, scrapped previously Splice, scrapped their roster and built what they've built. And Rogue too, right? Like, Rogue is an incredibly young team, and it speaks to the depth of the European regional leagues. And I think that, like, the ERL, many of those are online also. They were online anyway, and that's why I think you see really high tier performances there. So this is comfortable for a lot of these players, for Rogue and Mad Lions, I think, because they've done this for a while and they were stars in the ERLs already. So this is comfortable to them, and I don't want to take away from that, right? I'm sure we can dive into whether Mad Lions is a legitimate best team, one of the best teams in all of EU LCS/LEC history. Like, that's another discussion. But yeah, like, these two teams are excelling, I think, in part because they're really comfortable. That stage factor is out the window for them. And meanwhile, like, this is very uncomfortable, I think, to your point, Emily, for some of the people who have been in the scene for a while. And when I look at the middle of the pack teams, like, there's just this massive inconsistency, right? Like, week before last, or weekend before last, we see like Origin with Jack Troll come out and just stomp everyone, right? Like, somehow magically, like. And again, we talked about this last week. I think it's because more so because Upset's comfortable with Jack Troll more than he was Destiny. Less because Jack Troll is skill-wise a better player. But yeah, like, we see Origin like stomp people last week, and then this week they come out and lose both games. And the same can be said for teams like Fnatic. Fnatic's been on a really good streak the last 2 weeks. But guess what? 3 weeks ago they lost to Schalke AO4. And it's just like every single one of them, like every single one of these middle of the pack teams will look really good for a short burst of time, and then they'll get ran over. And it makes no sense to me. I don't think that this is the Soup League, and I don't know if we could chalk that all up because of online, but like something's up in the LEC generally, and a lot of these teams cannot keep it together for more than like 2 to 4 game stints. They'll do really good for 2 or 4 games in a row, and then like they'll just fall off the face of the mountain. And we've seen it the entire split, with the exception of the top half of Rogue and Mad Lions. But even then, Mad Lions is like losing to SK and stuff like that, and you're just like, what's going on here? Like this league is like very questionable right now.